In the vast expanse of the cosmos, where stars burned like ancient lanterns and galaxies spiraled in silent majesty, there existed a realm that defied human comprehension. It was a place where time bent to the will of unseen forces, and space itself seemed alive with whispers of forgotten civilizations. This was the domain of the Zorathians, a species as enigmatic as they were powerful. Their empire stretched across countless star systems, their influence woven into the very fabric of existence. But among them all, none commanded more awe or fear than their sovereign, the Alien Queen. The Queen's throne room floated within an asteroid belt shrouded by nebular clouds, its walls forged from obsidian-like material that pulsed faintly with bioluminescent veins. These veins glowed in hues of violet and gold, casting eerie shadows over the chamber. The air inside was thick, almost liquid, filled with pheromones that could overwhelm any lesser being who dared approach her. She sat upon a massive dais made of crystalline structures that refracted light into dazzling patterns, each shard humming softly as if attuned to her presence. Around her swirled a retinue of drones, silent, faceless creatures whose sole purpose was to serve her every whim without question. Her form was both beautiful and terrifying, a paradox that left even seasoned explorers trembling at the mere thought of encountering her. Towering nearly 12 feet tall, she possessed an elongated torso covered in iridescent scales that shimmered between shades of emerald and sapphire. Her limbs were sleek yet muscular, ending in razor-sharp claws tipped with venomous barbs. Most striking, however, were her eyes, two enormous orbs that dominated her head, glowing with an inner fire that shifted colors depending on her mood. They were windows to a mind so complex, so alien, that no human had ever truly understood what lay behind them. Rumors about the Queen spread far beyond the borders of her empire. Some spoke of her insatiable curiosity, claiming she sought knowledge above all else. Others whispered of darker inclinations, tales of experiments conducted on captured beings from distant worlds. Yet for all the speculation, one truth remained undeniable. The Alien Queen ruled with absolute authority, her word law across galaxies. To cross her was to invite annihilation, to please her. Well, few lived long enough to tell such stories. And now, amidst this backdrop of cosmic grandeur and dread, something unprecedented had occurred. A human, a fragile creature born of Earth's blue skies and green fields, had been summoned before her. Not as a prisoner, not as prey, but as something else entirely. Something no one could have predicted. For reasons known only to herself, the Queen had issued an order unlike any other. "Human, you must examine me." Captain Elias Drake stood frozen, his heart pounding against his ribcage like a trapped bird desperate to escape. He had faced death countless times during his years as a deep space explorer, navigating treacherous asteroid fields and outmaneuvering hostile alien factions. Yet nothing, not the roar of plasma cannons nor the suffocating void of open space, could compare to the terror coursing through him now. Before him loomed the Alien Queen, her luminous eyes boring into his soul as though dissecting every secret he'd ever kept. And then came those words, spoken in a voice that resonated like thunder rolling through a canyon. "Human, you must examine me." Elias blinked, certain he'd misheard. His translator implant buzzed faintly in his ear, confirming the accuracy of the translation. The phrase hung heavy in the air, charged with implications he couldn't begin to unravel. Examine her? What did that even mean? Was it some twisted test? A cruel joke designed to break him further? Or worse still, was it an invitation to his own demise? He swallowed hard, his throat dry despite the humid atmosphere of the throne room. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, to turn and run until he found himself back aboard his battered ship, streaking away from this nightmare. But he knew better. Running would only seal his fate. Instead, he forced himself to meet her gaze, though doing so felt like staring directly into the sun. "Examine you," he repeated, his voice cracking under the weight of disbelief. "Your Majesty, I don't understand." The Queen tilted her head slightly, her movements fluid and deliberate, like a predator assessing its prey. Her clawed fingers tapped rhythmically against the armrest of her throne, each click echoing ominously in the cavernous chamber. "You are a healer among your kind," she said, her tone devoid of emotion yet laced with an unshakable authority. "A physician who repairs broken bodies. Is this not true?" Elias nodded hesitantly, his mind racing. Yes, he had trained as a doctor before joining the Exploration Corps, patching up wounds and treating illnesses on remote colonies. But that skill set paled in comparison to whatever advanced medical technology the Zorathians undoubtedly possessed. Why would she need him? What possible use could a primitive human have for someone like her? "You will examine me," she continued, her glowing eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "I require your perspective. Your humanity." Her words sent a chill down his spine. Perspective? Humanity? The concept seemed absurd when applied to someone, or something, as alien as her. Still, he couldn't deny the flicker of intrigue buried beneath his mounting dread. There was something almost vulnerable in her request, though it clashed violently with the overwhelming power radiating from her presence. Could it be that she wasn't merely toying with him? That she genuinely needed something only he could provide? Before Elias could respond, the Queen gestured sharply with one hand, and two of her drones glided forward, carrying a sleek metallic case between them. They placed it at his feet before retreating silently to their positions along the edges of the room. With another wave of her claw, the Queen commanded, "Open it." Hesitating only briefly, Elias knelt and unlatched the case. Inside, he found an array of instruments, some familiar, others utterly foreign. Scalpels, probes, and scanners lay alongside tools whose functions he couldn't begin to guess. Each piece gleamed with precision craftsmanship, clearly designed for delicate work. Whatever examination she wanted, it was clear she intended for him to perform it thoroughly. Standing again, Elias turned back to the Queen, his pulse quickening. "Why me?" he asked, his voice steadier now. "Surely your own people." "They cannot see what you see," she interrupted, her tone sharp enough to cut steel. "They lack the detachment, the objectivity. You are different. Fragile, yes, but also untainted." Untainted. The word struck him like a blow. Did she mean untouched by the corruption of her world? Or perhaps she saw humans as blank slates, free from the biases ingrained in her own kind. Either way, the implication lingered uncomfortably in his mind. Taking a deep breath, Elias squared his shoulders. If this was a test, he would face it head-on. If it was a trap, he would walk into it willingly, for there was no other choice. Slowly, he reached for the nearest instrument, his fingers trembling slightly as they closed around its cool surface. "Very well," he said, meeting her piercing gaze once more. "Tell me where to begin." The first touch of the scanner against the alien Queen's scaled skin sent a jolt of electricity through Elias's system, both literal and metaphorical. The device hummed softly as it activated, emitting a pale blue light that danced across her iridescent surface. He had expected resistance, perhaps even hostility, but instead, she remained eerily still, her massive frame towering over him like a statue carved from living stone. Her eyes, however, betrayed a flicker of something unreadable, anticipation, maybe, or unease. It was impossible to tell. As the scanner moved methodically over her torso, Elias marveled at the complexity of her physiology. The scales weren't just decorative, they shifted subtly under the light, revealing intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with life. Beneath them, layers of tissue interwove in ways that defied human anatomy, blending organic structures with what appeared to be crystalline formations. The readings on the scanner fluctuated wildly, unable to categorize what it detected. Whatever the Queen was, she transcended simple biology. "This is extraordinary," Elias murmured, half to himself. He adjusted the settings on the scanner, trying to isolate specific data points, but the results only grew more perplexing. Her internal systems operated on principles he couldn't comprehend, energy pathways that resembled neural networks yet behaved like quantum circuits. She wasn't merely alive, she was a nexus of forces beyond his understanding. The Queen's low growl rumbled through the chamber, vibrating in his chest. "Speak plainly, human. What do you see?" Elias hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Your body. It's not just biological. It's like you're part machine, part organism, and something else entirely. The technology integrated into your form. It's seamless, as if it evolved naturally rather than being engineered." She inclined her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "Continue." Encouraged, Elias pressed on, switching to a different tool, a probe designed to measure energy signatures. As he worked, he noticed subtle changes in her demeanor. Her breathing slowed, becoming almost imperceptible, and her claws relaxed slightly where they rested on the throne. It dawned on him that she might actually be nervous, though the idea seemed absurd given her overwhelming presence. Perhaps vulnerability wasn't exclusive to humans after all. When he reached her abdomen, the probe emitted a sharp beep, startling him. On the display, a cluster of anomalies appeared, fluctuating energy patterns that didn't align with the rest of her physiology. Frowning, Elias leaned closer, adjusting the sensitivity of the device. "There's something here," he said, his voice tinged with both fascination and concern. "An irregularity. It's localized, but unusual." The Queen stiffened, her eyes narrowing dangerously. "Describe it." "It's difficult to say," Elias admitted, sweat trickling down his temple. "It's not damage exactly, but it feels unstable, like a feedback loop or a malfunction." "Have you experienced any symptoms? Pain, fatigue, anything out of the ordinary?" For a moment, she said nothing, her gaze fixed on him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. Then slowly she exhaled, a sound like wind rushing through a canyon. "Yes," she finally admitted, her voice softer than before. "Weakness. Moments of disorientation. My drones dismissed it as irrelevant, but," she trailed off, her claws tapping restlessly against the armrest. Elias felt a pang of sympathy, surprising himself. Despite her fearsome reputation, she was still a being capable of suffering, of uncertainty. And now, inexplicably, she had entrusted him, a mere human, with uncovering the source of her ailment. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. "I'll need more time," he said firmly, setting the probe aside and reaching for another instrument. "Whatever this is, it's complex. But I think I can help, if you'll let me." The Queen regarded him silently, her glowing eyes searching his face as if weighing his sincerity. Finally, she gave a single nod. "Proceed." Hours passed, though time seemed meaningless in the alien throne room. The rhythmic hum of the instruments blended with the soft glow of the bioluminescent walls, creating an almost hypnotic atmosphere. Elias worked tirelessly, his hands moving with practiced precision as he delved deeper into the mysteries of the Queen's condition. Each discovery brought new questions, each answer revealed further complexities. Yet beneath the scientific rigor, an unexpected connection began to form, a fragile thread of trust stretching between two vastly different beings. At one point, Elias paused to recalibrate the scanner, his fingers brushing lightly against the Queen's side. She flinched ever so slightly, a reaction so subtle he might have missed it had he not been paying close attention. Startled, he pulled back immediately. "Did I hurt you?" he asked, his voice tinged with genuine concern. "No," she replied, her tone softer than usual. "But your touch, it is unfamiliar. Uncomfortable." Elias frowned, considering her words. "Unfamiliar how? Is it because I'm human?" She hesitated, her claws flexing slightly. "My kind does not permit such contact unless necessary. Touch is reserved for dominance, for control. What you do now, it is intimate, vulnerable." The realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. In her culture, physical proximity likely carried profound implications. Power dynamics, hierarchies, perhaps even taboos. By allowing him to examine her so closely, she was exposing herself in ways that went far beyond the physical. The thought humbled him, filling him with a renewed sense of purpose. "I'll be careful," he promised, his voice steady. "But I need to understand what I'm dealing with. If we're going to fix this, I have to know everything." To his surprise, the Queen nodded, her glowing eyes softening slightly. "Ask your questions, human. I will answer as best I can." Their dialogue unfolded haltingly at first, each exchange fraught with tension and mutual wariness. But as Elias probed further, both physically and verbally, the barriers between them began to dissolve. He learned that the instability in her core stemmed from an experimental procedure she had undergone decades ago, an attempt to enhance her already formidable abilities. The process had succeeded, granting her unparalleled strength and longevity, but it had also introduced unforeseen consequences. Over time, the synthetic components fused to her biology had begun to degrade, creating the erratic energy patterns he had detected. "You risked yourself for power," Elias said quietly, piecing together the fragments of her story. "Why?" Her response was immediate, her voice laced with quiet resolve. "Power ensures survival. Without it, my people would falter. My empire would crumble." "And yet," Elias countered, "you've sacrificed your own stability for theirs. Isn't that contradictory?" For the first time, the Queen looked away, her gaze drifting toward the swirling nebula visible through the chamber's translucent ceiling. "Perhaps," she admitted after a long pause. "But leadership demands sacrifice, even when it costs us everything." The admission caught Elias off guard, stirring emotions he hadn't anticipated. Here was a ruler who embodied ruthlessness and authority, yet beneath her armor of invincibility lay a deeply personal struggle. She bore the weight of her decisions alone, shouldering burdens no one else could comprehend. In that moment, she ceased to be merely the alien queen. She became something more, a sentient being grappling with the same universal truths that haunted every intelligent species. As the hours wore on, their interactions grew less formal, more collaborative. Elias found himself sharing anecdotes from his own life, stories of patience he had saved, failures he had endured, moments of triumph and despair. In return, the Queen offered glimpses of her past, recounting battles fought and alliances forged, victories celebrated and losses mourned. Though their worlds were galaxies apart, their shared experiences created a bridge that transcended their differences. By the time Elias completed his preliminary analysis, he felt a strange kinship with the Queen, a bond forged not out of necessity but through mutual vulnerability. They were no longer captor and captive, ruler and subject. They were simply two individuals navigating the complexities of existence, bound together by circumstance and a growing understanding of one another. But as Elias reviewed the final data, a shadow of doubt crept into his mind. The solution to the Queen's ailment was within reach, but implementing it would require resources and expertise far beyond what he possessed. And even then, success was uncertain. The path ahead was fraught with peril, and failure could mean disaster, not just for the Queen, but for the countless lives dependent on her rule. Yet as he glanced up at her, meeting her luminous gaze, he realized something crucial. This wasn't just about saving her. It was about proving that cooperation, empathy, and trust could transcend even the widest chasms of difference. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, or not at all. The weight of the decision pressed down on Elias like a collapsing star. He stared at the data scrolling across the scanner's display, each line a puzzle piece in a mosaic too vast to fully comprehend. The Queen's condition was deteriorating faster than he had anticipated, the unstable energy patterns spreading like cracks in glass. If left unchecked, they would cascade into catastrophic failure, a chain reaction that could unravel her very essence. And with her demise, the fragile balance holding her empire together would shatter, plunging countless worlds into chaos. But the solution eluded him. The tools at his disposal were rudimentary compared to what was needed. Even if he devised a plan, executing it would require resources only the Zorathians possessed, and gaining access to those resources meant navigating layers of bureaucracy, suspicion, and outright hostility. His mind raced, cycling through possibilities, discarding them almost as quickly as they formed. Time was slipping away, and with every passing second, the stakes grew higher. "You hesitate," the Queen observed, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. She leaned forward slightly, her glowing eyes locking onto his with unnerving intensity. "Why?" Elias exhaled sharply, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. "Because I don't have all the answers yet," he admitted, his voice strained. "Fixing this isn't just about patching up a wound or resetting a system. It's bigger than that. More complicated. And I'm not sure I can do it alone." For a moment, she said nothing, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she rose from her throne, her towering form casting long shadows across the chamber. Her movements were deliberate, measured, as though she were weighing each step before taking it. When she finally spoke, her tone carried an edge of quiet resolve. "Then you will not be alone." Elias blinked, startled. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she replied, her claws flexing slightly, "that I will provide whatever assistance you require. My drones, my scientists, my engineers, they are yours to command. You will have unrestricted access to our archives, our laboratories, everything within my dominion." She paused, tilting her head slightly. "Do not mistake this for generosity, human. It is necessity. Without your success, there is no future. For me, or for my people." Her words sent a jolt through him, equal parts relief and apprehension. On one hand, having the full might of the Zorathian Empire at his disposal was an opportunity unlike any other. On the other, the responsibility was staggering. One misstep, one miscalculation, and the consequences could ripple across galaxies. Yet even as doubt gnawed at the edges of his resolve, a spark of determination ignited within him. This wasn't just about saving the Queen anymore. It was about proving that humanity had something to offer, that even in the face of overwhelming odds, ingenuity and perseverance could prevail. "All right," he said, his voice firm despite the turmoil swirling inside him. "Here's what we need to do." The days that followed blurred into a frenetic whirlwind of activity. Under the Queen's directive, Elias was granted unprecedented access to the Zorathian research facilities, sprawling complexes that defied imagination. Towering spires of crystalline architecture housed laboratories filled with equipment so advanced it seemed plucked from science fiction. Holographic interfaces floated in midair, displaying streams of data that danced like living constellations. Autonomous drones zipped between workstations, delivering samples and components with mechanical precision. Everywhere he looked, Elias saw evidence of a civilization centuries ahead of Earth's technological curve. Yet for all their sophistication, the Zorathian scientists regarded him with thinly veiled skepticism. To them, he was an anomaly, an outsider thrust into their world by circumstance. Some dismissed him outright, muttering under their breaths about the absurdity of entrusting such critical work to a primitive human. Others watched him warily, their glowing eyes tracking his every move as though expecting him to fail spectacularly. Only a handful treated him with cautious respect, intrigued by his unconventional methods and unorthodox approach. Despite the challenges, Elias threw himself into the task with relentless focus. Guided by the Queen's authority, he assembled a team of the brightest minds available, blending Zorathian expertise with his own medical knowledge. Together, they pored over the data he had collected, dissecting each anomaly and theorizing potential solutions. The process was grueling, marked by heated debates and sleepless nights. Progress came in fits and starts, breakthroughs tempered by setbacks that tested everyone's patience. Through it all, the Queen remained a constant presence, observing their efforts with an air of quiet vigilance. She attended meetings, offering insights that often cut through the noise of conflicting opinions. Her input was invaluable, bridging gaps in understanding and steering the project toward viable paths. Yet there were moments when Elias caught glimpses of her vulnerability, the subtle tremors in her claws, the fleeting shadows that passed over her luminous eyes. Despite her outward strength, she was fighting a battle against time itself, and the strain was beginning to show. One evening, as the team worked late into the night, Elias found himself alone in the main laboratory with the Queen. The others had retired to rest, leaving behind a cavernous space bathed in the soft glow of holographic displays. He sat hunched over a workstation, reviewing simulations of the proposed treatment protocol, when her voice broke the silence. "Tell me," she said, her tone softer than usual. "Do you believe we can succeed?" Elias glanced up, surprised by the question. For all her power and authority, there was a raw honesty in her voice that caught him off guard. Setting aside the tablet in his hands, he leaned back in his chair and met her gaze. "I want to say yes," he admitted after a moment. "But the truth is, I don't know. There are too many variables, too many unknowns. All I can do is keep trying, keep pushing forward, and hope that we find the right answer before it's too late." The Queen studied him for a long moment, her expression inscrutable. Then, unexpectedly, she lowered herself to the floor, sitting cross-legged beside him in a gesture that felt almost human. "Hope," she repeated, the word rolling off her tongue like a foreign concept. "It is unfamiliar. Yet I find myself clinging to it, however tenuously." Her admission struck a chord deep within Elias, stirring emotions he hadn't allowed himself to feel since arriving in her domain. Hope was a fragile thing, easily shattered by reality's harsh truths. And yet, it was also resilient, capable of enduring even in the darkest of times. Perhaps that was why it resonated so strongly between them. Two beings separated by species, culture, and experience, yet united by the shared desire to overcome adversity. "We're closer than we were before," he said gently, offering her a small smile. "That's something, isn't it?" She inclined her head slightly, a faint glimmer of warmth flickering in her eyes. "Yes," she murmured. "It is." As the days turned into weeks, the team made steady progress, inching closer to a viable solution. The treatment protocol took shape, a complex interplay of nanotechnology, bioengineering, and quantum stabilization techniques designed to repair the degradation in the Queen's synthetic biological hybrid systems. Each component was meticulously crafted, tested, and refined, drawing on both Zorathian innovation and Elias's unique perspective as a human physician. But as the final stages approached, a new challenge emerged, one that threatened to derail everything they had worked toward. A faction within the Zorathian hierarchy, wary of placing so much trust in a human, began to push back against the project. Whispers of dissent spread through the ranks, fueled by fear and distrust. Some argued that relying on an outsider was reckless, that the risks outweighed the potential rewards. Others went further, suggesting that the Queen's condition was a sign of weakness, a flaw that undermined her fitness to rule. The tension reached a boiling point during a council meeting convened to review the project's status. Seated at the head of a massive obsidian table, the Queen listened impassively as her advisors voiced their concerns, their voices rising in a cacophony of accusation and doubt. Elias stood at her side, feeling acutely aware of the hostile stares directed his way. The weight of their scrutiny bore down on him, threatening to crush the fragile alliance he had built. When the accusations turned personal, questioning his competence and motives, Elias stepped forward, his voice cutting through the din like a knife. "If you think I'm here for glory or gain, you're wrong," he declared, his tone fierce. "I'm here because your Queen asked me to help, and because I believe that working together is the only way to solve this problem. If you'd rather let pride and prejudice stand in the way of progress, then fine, but don't blame me when the consequences come crashing down around you." The room fell silent, the gravity of his words hanging heavy in the air. The Queen rose to her full height, her presence commanding absolute attention. "Enough," she said, her voice resonating with authority. "This human has earned my trust, and by extension, yours. To question him is to question me. Do not make that mistake again." Her declaration quelled the dissent, for now, but the underlying tension remained, simmering just beneath the surface. As the meeting adjourned, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was only beginning. The road ahead was fraught with peril, and the outcome hung precariously in the balance. But as he exchanged a glance with the Queen, he found solace in the unspoken understanding that passed between them. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, or not at all. The final days leading up to the implementation of the treatment protocol were a blur of tension and anticipation. The laboratory hummed with activity as the team worked tirelessly to prepare every detail, ensuring that nothing was left to chance. Each component of the procedure had been meticulously reviewed, tested, and retested until Elias was certain they had accounted for every variable, or as many as humanly possible. Yet despite his confidence in the plan, an undercurrent of unease lingered. There were no guarantees, only calculated risks. On the eve of the procedure, Elias found himself standing alone in the observation deck overlooking the lab. Below him, drones moved with mechanical precision, assembling the final pieces of equipment while holographic displays flickered with streams of data. He leaned against the railing, staring out at the swirling nebula beyond the transparent walls. Its ethereal beauty offered little comfort. Instead, it served as a stark reminder of the vastness of space, and how small their efforts seemed in comparison. "You doubt yourself." The Queen's voice startled him, pulling him from his thoughts. She approached silently, her presence commanding even without her towering height or luminous gaze. For once, she seemed less like the sovereign ruler of an empire and more like a being burdened by uncertainty, a reflection of the doubts Elias himself carried. "I don't doubt the science," he replied after a moment, turning to face her. "I doubt whether I'm enough. Whether any of us are enough." Her glowing eyes softened slightly, though her expression remained inscrutable. "Doubt is natural," she said, her tone quieter than usual. "But it must not consume you. Trust in what you have built. Trust in those who stand beside you." Elias let out a humorless laugh, shaking his head. It's hard to trust when so much is riding on this. If we fail, he trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Failure is not an option, she stated firmly, though there was no malice in her words, only resolve. Not because I demand perfection, but because giving up would mean abandoning everything we have fought for. And I will not allow that. Not now, not ever. Her determination ignited something within him, a spark of defiance against the weight of despair. She was right. Failure wasn't an option, not when hope still burned brightly between them. With renewed purpose, Elias straightened and met her gaze. Then let's make sure we succeed. The next morning, the chamber designated for the procedure was alive with controlled chaos. Technicians scurried about, calibrating instruments and double-checking connections. Holographic interfaces projected schematics and vitals onto the walls, creating a kaleidoscope of information that pulsed in sync with the Queen's steady heartbeat. At the center of it all stood the crystalline platform where she would undergo the treatment, a structure designed to stabilize both her physical form and the volatile energy coursing through her core. As Elias prepared the final adjustments, the Queen ascended the platform, her movements deliberate yet tinged with vulnerability. She reclined into position, her massive frame dwarfing the apparatus beneath her. Her claws rested lightly on the surface, and for the first time, Elias noticed a faint tremor running through them. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it spoke volumes about the gravity of the moment. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. She nodded once, her luminous eyes locking onto his. "Do what must be done, human." With that, the chamber fell silent. The technicians retreated to their stations, leaving Elias alone with the Queen. Taking a deep breath, he activated the system, initiating the sequence that would either save her or seal their fates. The machinery whirred to life, bathing the room in a soft blue light as nanobots deployed into her bloodstream, guided by quantum algorithms tailored specifically for her unique physiology. Monitors displayed real-time feedback, tracking the stabilization of her energy patterns and the integration of synthetic components with biological tissue. Minutes stretched into hours as the procedure unfolded. Every fluctuation in the readings sent a jolt of adrenaline coursing through Elias's veins, forcing him to remain hyper-focused. The Queen endured the process stoically, though occasional ripples of discomfort passed over her features. Through it all, Elias maintained a constant vigil, adjusting parameters and troubleshooting anomalies as they arose. And then, just as exhaustion began to take its toll, the monitors stabilized. The chaotic energy signatures smoothed out, coalescing into harmonious patterns that pulsed steadily. A collective sigh of relief rippled through the observation deck as the technicians exchanged astonished glances. Against all odds, the procedure had worked. When the Queen opened her eyes, the change was immediate and profound. Her scales shimmered with renewed vitality, their iridescent hues brighter than before. The tension that had gripped her frame melted away, replaced by a sense of balance and strength. She rose from the platform, testing her limbs with cautious movements before fixing Elias with a piercing gaze. "You have done the impossible," she said, her voice carrying a note of awe. "You have given me back myself." Elias shook his head, fatigue etched into his face. "We did it together. You trusted me, and I trusted you. That's what made the difference." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, unexpectedly, the Queen extended one clawed hand toward him. It was a gesture unlike anything she had shown before, one of gratitude, respect, and perhaps even friendship. Tentatively, Elias reached out, placing his hand against hers. The contrast between their forms was striking, yet the connection felt undeniable. "Human," she said finally, her tone softer than he had ever heard it. "You have proven that your kind has value far beyond what I once believed. Perhaps there is wisdom in seeking understanding across the stars." Elias smiled faintly, the weight of everything they had endured lifting from his shoulders. "Maybe someday, others will see that too." As the chamber emptied and the echoes of their shared triumph faded, Elias knew that this was only the beginning. The bond forged between them transcended species and galaxies, a testament to the power of cooperation and empathy. Though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, he walked away with a newfound belief that even in the darkest corners of the universe, hope could shine brightest when nurtured by trust and courage. And somewhere, amidst the swirling nebulae and distant suns, the alien Queen watched him go, her luminous eyes reflecting a future shaped by the choices they had made, together.